Imagine you are a German intelligence officer in France in the late summer of 1944. You are a professional. Your job is to track the enemy, to understand his movements, to anticipate his next strike. You are very, very good at your job. For the past 48 hours, your reconnaissance patrols and aerial photographs have confirmed the arrival of a massive new American armored division near the front lines. A fresh force of at least 15,000 men, with hundreds of Sherman tanks, artillery pieces, and trucks. The radio chatter is constant, the airwaves buzzing with the casual, confident talk of American tankers preparing for a major offensive. You have seen the tank tracks in the mud. You have seen the silhouettes of their tanks through the trees. You have heard the unmistakable rumble of their engines echoing through the valleys at night. Your report to High Command is unequivocal. A major American armored thrust is imminent in this sector. The generals listen. They divert two of their precious, battle-hardened Panzer divisions to meet this new threat. Thousands of German soldiers are rushed to the front, digging in, preparing for a massive battle. They are ready. And then nothing happens. The next day, your scouts report something impossible. The American division is gone. Not retreating, not repositioning, it has simply vanished. The endless lines of tanks have disappeared. The radio signals have gone silent. The ground, which yesterday was a beehive of activity, is now eerily quiet. It is as if 30,000 tons of American steel and 15,000 men just evaporated into thin air. You are confused. Your commanders are furious. They demand an explanation. How could an entire armored division disappear overnight? Is it a new American tactic, a secret weapon, or are you losing your mind? You are not losing your mind, but you are fighting an enemy you cannot comprehend. You are not fighting soldiers of flesh and blood. You are fighting an army of artists, actors, and magicians. You have just been haunted by the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, the top-secret American unit known as the Ghost Army. This is the story of how 1,100 men armed with rubber tanks, giant speakers, and pure imagination became the most feared and misunderstood weapon in the American arsenal. This is the story of the phantoms who tricked the German army into fighting shadows. To understand the creation of the Ghost Army, you must understand a fundamental truth of warfare. Information is as powerful as ammunition. Deception, the art of making your enemy see what you want him to see, is as old as war itself. Sun Tzu wrote about it. The Greeks did it with the Trojan horse. But in the vast, mechanized slaughterhouse of World War II, the art of deception needed to be industrialized. By 1943, the Allied High Command planning for the invasion of Europe knew they faced a critical problem. The German army was experienced, well-led, and deeply entrenched. A direct, head-on assault would be a bloodbath. To succeed, they needed an edge. They needed to be able to manipulate the battlefield, to draw the enemy's strength to one place while they struck in another. They needed the ability to create phantom armies, to make the Germans chase ghosts. The inspiration came from the British, who had achieved stunning success with their own deception operations in North Africa, most famously at the Battle of El Alamein.
There they had used dummy tanks and fake radio traffic to convince Rommel that the main British attack was coming from the south, while the real assault came from the north. The success of this operation proved the concept. The Americans needed their own unit dedicated to this strange new form of sonic and visual warfare. And so, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops was born. But this was to be no ordinary military unit. To build an army of illusion, you don't recruit farm boys and factory workers. You recruit magicians. The call went out, not to the military academies, but to a completely different world. They recruited from the art schools of New York and Philadelphia, looking for painters, illustrators, and designers who could create convincing visual illusions. They recruited from advertising agencies of Madison Avenue, men who understood the art of persuasion and propaganda. They recruited sound engineers from radio stations, men who could manipulate audio to create the illusion of a massive army on the move. They even recruited actors and theatrical designers, men who understood stagecraft, costuming, and performance. The unit that assembled at Camp Forest, Tennessee, was one of the most bizarre collections of talent in the entire U.S. Army. It was a Bohemian regiment, a military unit with a genius-level IQ, where a painter who had studied in Paris served alongside a sound engineer who had worked with Orson Welles. Men like Bill Blass, the future fashion icon, served alongside Ellsworth Kelly, who would become a world-renowned minimalist painter. These were not your typical soldiers. They were creative, unconventional, and allergic to traditional military discipline. They were a commander's nightmare and a strategist's dream. Their mission was simple in its goal, but fiendishly complex in its execution. They were to impersonate other, much larger U.S. Army units. They were to be a traveling roadshow of deception, using sight and sound to make the Germans believe a 30,000-man division was in a location where in reality there was only a handful of artists and actors. Their weapon was not the M1 Garand. Their weapon was the human imagination. And they were about to be given the most important stage in the world, the battlefields of Europe.
To pull off a deception on the scale of an entire army division, the Ghost Army needed a unique and ingenious arsenal. Their weapons were not designed to kill, but to convince. Their toolkit was a fascinating mix of low-tech ingenuity and cutting-edge technology, a stage magician's bag of tricks scaled up for war. The first and most famous part of their arsenal was the Visual Deception Wing, the 603rd Camouflage Engineer Battalion. This was the home of the artists. Their primary tool was the inflatable tank. These were life-sized, meticulously crafted replicas of Sherman tanks, M10 tank destroyers, artillery pieces, and even airplanes made of rubberized fabric and inflated with air compressors. A 30-ton Sherman tank could be inflated by 4 men in about 15 minutes. From the air or from a distance on the ground, they were indistinguishable from the real thing. But they were so light that 4 men could pick one up and move it, a sight that would have surely broken the mind of any German scout who witnessed it. But the artists didn't just plop down a few rubber tanks. They were masters of stagecraft. They knew that a real tank division leaves a real footprint. So they created fake tank tracks in the mud using specially designed rollers. They would drive a single jeep in a loop over and over again to create the illusion of a busy motor pool.
They even meticulously replicated the unit markings and bumper numbers of the division they were impersonating, ensuring that any German spy in the area would report back the correct, misleading information. The second part of the deception was the Sonic Warfare Wing, the 3132nd Signal Service Company. This was the domain of the sound engineers. Their weapon was a set of massive 500-pound speakers mounted on the back of half-tracks. These speakers could blast the sounds of an armored division, the clatter of tank treads, the rumble of truck engines, the shouts of men, the sounds of construction, at a volume that could be heard up to 15 miles away. Their work was a form of audio theater. They had a library of sound effects recorded with painstaking accuracy at Fort Knox. They would create sonic scripts to match the visual illusion. If the artists had set up a fake column of tanks moving at night, the sonic team would drive their trucks along the same route, broadcasting the perfectly synchronized sounds of that column. They could create the illusion of a tank battalion assembling for an attack, or an artillery unit digging in, all with the turn of a dial. For the German soldiers on the other side of the front line, listening in the darkness, the sounds were real, they were terrifying, and they were a complete and utter lie. The third element was radio deception, or spoof radio. A small team of Signal Corps experts would mimic the radio traffic of the division being impersonated. They were masters of imitation, able to copy the unique conversational style and Morse code fist of a real radio operator. They would create a web of fake radio traffic, reporting troop movements that weren't happening, coordinating attacks that would never come. German radio intelligence, listening in, would diligently record this traffic, confirming the presence of a large American force, never realizing they were listening to a carefully orchestrated play. The final, and perhaps most audacious element, was the theatrical wing. This was pure performance art. The men of the Ghost Army would put on the divisional patches of the unit they were impersonating, drive their jeeps into nearby French towns, and put on a show. They would swagger into local bars and cafes, talking loudly about their upcoming attack or complaining about their incompetent commanders, knowing that there were likely German spies or local collaborators among the French civilians. They would even set up fake command posts with actors impersonating generals and colonels, creating the illusion of a division headquarters. It was a level of detailed, multi-sensory deception that the German army was completely unprepared for. This, then, was the Ghost Army's arsenal. Rubber tanks, giant speakers, fake radio signals, and a company of actors. A bizarre, almost comical set of tools. But in the hands of these creative soldiers, they would become one of the most effective and life-saving weapons of the war.
The Ghost Army's first major performance was a crucial part of the biggest magic trick in military history, Operation Fortitude, the grand deception plan designed to fool the Germans about the location of the D-Day landings. While the main Ghost Army unit was still preparing in England, a smaller precursor unit was used to create the illusion of General George S. Patton's 1st U.S. Army Group massing in southeastern England, threatening an invasion at the Pas de Calais. They used their inflatable tanks and fake radio traffic to help convince the German High Command that the Normandy landings were just a diversion.
The deception worked so well that Hitler kept his powerful 15th Army in Calais for weeks after D-Day, waiting for an invasion that would never come. The full Ghost Army unit, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, landed in Normandy just a few weeks after the invasion. Their first missions were small-scale tests of their strange new craft. They would impersonate a battalion of tanks to draw German artillery fire away from a real American attack. They would simulate a nighttime river crossing with their sound trucks to distract the Germans while the real crossing happened miles away. Their first major, division-level deception took place in August 1944 during the brutal siege of the port city of Brest. The American forces were bogged down in a costly head-on fight. The Ghost Army was called in to create a diversion. They set up their inflatable tanks and sound trucks miles to the east of the city, creating the illusion that a fresh new armored division was preparing to attack the German flank. The German commander, unnerved by this new threat, was forced to divert precious troops and artillery away from the main American assault to counter this phantom force. The deception didn't win the battle, but it confused the enemy, relieved the pressure on the real American forces, and proved that their strange arsenal of lies could have a real, tangible effect on the battlefield. As the Allies broke out of Normandy and began their race across France, the Ghost Army's role became even more critical. General Patton's Third Army was advancing so rapidly that it was often leaving its flanks dangerously exposed. The Ghost Army became Patton's personal phantom guard. They would move into a thinly held sector of the front, set up their rubber tanks and speakers, and create the illusion of a powerful armored division holding the line. German reconnaissance would spot this division and report its presence. The German commanders, believing the flank was heavily defended, would hesitate to attack. In reality, the line was being held by a few hundred artists and sound engineers. It was an incredibly dangerous bluff. If the Germans had ever called it, if they had launched a serious attack, the Ghost Army would have been annihilated. They were actors on a stage, and their only defense was the conviction of their performance. They walked a tightrope between brilliant deception and certain death, and they never once fell.
As the autumn of 1944 turned into the brutal winter, the Ghost Army's operations became more audacious, their performances more elaborate. They were now masters of their craft, conducting over 20 major deceptions that would directly influence the course of the war. One of their most famous operations took place in September, along the Moselle River. The American 90th Infantry Division was struggling to maintain a fragile, overstretched front line. The Ghost Army was brought in to create the illusion that the 90th was much stronger than it actually was. For days they played their deadly game. By day, the artists would set up dummy artillery positions. By night, the sonic team would broadcast the sounds of those batteries firing, harassing missions. The fake radio operators would chatter about non-existent patrols and troop movements. They created a portrait of a powerful, aggressive American force, when, in reality, the line was paper-thin. But their most critical test in this sector came when a large German force, including elements of a panzer division, was spotted massing for a major counterattack against a dangerously weak point in the American line. The Ghost Army was ordered to create a phantom division to the north of the real American positions to try and draw the German attack away.
They worked frantically. They inflated dozens of tanks and trucks. They drove their sonic trucks back and forth all night, broadcasting the sounds of an entire armored division moving into position. The fake radio operators would chatter about non-existent patrols and troop movements. They created a portrait of a powerful, aggressive American force, when in reality, the line was paper-thin. The German commander, faced with this new phantom threat, hesitated. He delayed his attack for a full day to reassess the situation. That 24-hour delay was just enough time for real American reinforcements to arrive and shore up the line. The German counterattack, when it finally came, was met by a prepared and strengthened defense, and it failed. The Ghost Army, with nothing but rubber and sound, had saved an entire American division from a potential disaster. The German soldiers on the receiving end were living in a state of profound confusion. They would be shelled by artillery that their own reconnaissance swore wasn't there. They would be buzzed by fighter planes that their spotters couldn't see. They would report massive tank columns that would simply vanish overnight. The effect on the German High Command was equally chaotic. Their intelligence reports became a mess of contradictions. They were chasing ghosts across the map of France. They were diverting precious panzer divisions to counter phantom threats, wasting fuel, manpower, and time. The Ghost Army was not just a tactical weapon, it was a psychological one. It was injecting chaos and uncertainty directly into the mind of the German war machine, making it hesitant, paranoid, and prone to fatal errors. The men of the 23rd were fighting a war of nerves, and they were winning.
The Ghost Army's final and greatest performance took place in March of 1945. The Allied armies were poised on the banks of the Rhine River, the last major natural barrier protecting the heart of Germany. The final, massive offensive to cross the river and end the war, Operation Plunder, was being planned. The American Ninth Army was tasked with a major assault crossing near the town of Wesel. It was expected to be a bloodbath. The German side of the river was heavily defended by veteran troops with orders to fight to the last man. The High Command needed a major deception to draw German forces away from the real crossing point. This was the mission the Ghost Army had been created for. It would be their masterpiece. They were ordered to impersonate not one, but two full American armored divisions, the 30th and the 79th. Their mission was to stage a fake river crossing 10 miles south of the real assault location. This was their most ambitious, most complex, and most dangerous operation to date. The performance began days before the real assault. The artists of the 603rd Battalion worked tirelessly, setting up over 600 inflatable tanks, cannons, and vehicles. They created a massive, sprawling, fake motor pool, a convincing portrait of two divisions preparing to attack. To add to the realism, they even set up dummy landing craft along the riverbank. The Sonic team brought in their full orchestra of deception. For nights on end, they broadcast the sounds of an army on the move. They played recordings of bridging equipment being unloaded, of bulldozers carving out paths to the river.
The sounds were so realistic that they fooled not only the Germans across the river, but also other American units in the area. The fake radio traffic was a masterpiece of misdirection, simulating the complex communications of two divisions coordinating a massive river assault. And the actors put on their final show, driving around the area in trucks with the fake divisional patches, letting themselves be seen by German spotters. The Germans took the bait completely. Their intelligence reports were filled with warnings of a massive American buildup in the southern sector. The German command, convinced that this was the main point of attack, began to move their forces. They diverted 2 full Panzer divisions and several artillery battalions away from the real crossing point at Wesel to meet this phantom threat. On the night of the real assault, the Ghost Army played its final card. The Sonic team unleashed a deafening, all-night broadcast of a full-scale amphibious crossing, complete with the sounds of landing craft, shouting men, and construction equipment. The real American artillery, as part of the deception, even fired barrages in support of this fake attack. When the real American Ninth Army crossed the Rhine 10 miles to the north, they were met with surprisingly light resistance. The German divisions that should have been there to meet them, the divisions that should have turned the crossing into a slaughter, were all positioned miles to the south, staring at an empty riverbank, listening to the sounds of a battle that was never happening. The deception was a spectacular success. Military historians estimate that the Ghost Army's final performance saved the lives of thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands, of American soldiers. They had drawn the enemy's fangs, allowing the real army to cross the final barrier into the heart of the Reich. When the war in Europe ended, the men of the Ghost Army packed up their rubber tanks and their giant speakers. Their war was over, but their story was just beginning its long period of silence. Their mission, their methods, their very existence were deemed top secret. The men were ordered not to speak of what they had done, not even to their families. Their records were classified. For over 40 years, their incredible contribution to the war effort was a complete secret, a story known only to the men who had lived it. The artists, actors, and engineers went back to their civilian lives. Bill Blass became a fashion icon. Ellsworth Kelly became a celebrated painter. They lived their lives, carrying the secret of the phantom divisions they had once commanded. It was not until the 1980s that their story was finally declassified. Only then did the world begin to learn of the audacious, creative, and life-saving work of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. They were finally recognized for their unique form of bravery. A bravery that was measured not in enemies killed, but in lives saved. The story of the Ghost Army is more than just a quirky footnote in the history of World War II. It is a powerful testament to the power of imagination and ingenuity. It is a reminder that in the grim calculus of war, a clever idea can be more effective than 1,000 bullets. It is the story of a group of men who were given the most unconventional of weapons and used them to fight a secret, brilliant war. They were the magicians of the battlefield, the phantoms of the front line. They never fired a shot in anger, but their phantom cannons and rubber tanks helped to shatter the will of the German army. They were the soldiers who proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon in your arsenal is the one that exists only in your enemy's mind.